Do you know why? It's because we're live. Okay, there we go. So today, guys, we're going to do a demo here on the ILS-2 into Maui. And so we're going to kind of connect the dots to a lot of things, literally and figuratively, as we do this here as well. Commanding the board today is Story Balco. Story, wave your right hand over here. That's the only way you're going to see your hand. Okay, there's Story right there. So what we're going to attempt to do is to go back and forth, excuse me, between the actual aircraft display that you're going to see and also the ForeFlight here projected here on something which I hope it works correctly. So we will find out. Okay, so take a look right now at ForeFlight. Good job. Now, when you look at ForeFlight, where's that airplane?
It's some random black mountain.
Okay, do you see where that is over there?
West of the...
It's west. Okay, it's west of the airport. Okay, you see where it is. It's out in the Ow channel, I think is what it's called, something like that. It's just there on the northeast side of Lanai, and it's west of the upper northeast portion of Maui. Now, you can also see that not only do you see a sectional chart there, but what else do you see overlaid on that sectional chart? You see an approach plate. You see the approach plate on there? This is what ForeFlight can do for you. Not only do you get to see all the geographic stuff that you have right there, right, Gavin? Okay. I didn't know what was happening down there. And so what you're able to see here is you're able to see the approach plate and your aircraft geolocated over the actual approach in here to this airport. Do you think that might be useful? I think so. Okay, so this is why we teach ForeFlight. We teach you Maine, we teach you the Ozark way so that you understand what all of the buttons that you're pushing are all about. But then ultimately, when we actually fly, this is kind of how we actually do it. So we're going to get this set up, and I'm going to kind of talk you through, and I'm going to ask you questions along the way as we do it. So we're going to leave this on the main display. And so I have the simulation paused, and I have to unpause it occasionally just because of the fact that if I don't, it'll freeze. So first thing that I'm going to do, guys, is this. This is sort of what it looks like here when you're kind of looking outside. Here, this is the cockpit of a Cessna 172 with the G1000. And you'll notice down here at the bottom, this is an autopilot. The autopilot here, this is a Bendix King Cap 140 autopilot. It's functional. It's not the best in the world. In your aircraft, on this space right here, you have a Garmin GFC 700 autopilot, which is pretty amazing. So for this, we're actually going to use the autopilot because it's the only way I'm going to be able to kind of talk you guys through this thing and get the airplane where we want it to go, hopefully, here. The other thing that I want to tell you, just to add by way of a disclaimer, is that there are a tremendous number of functions on the G1000 in real life on our aircraft that are not available to us on this simulation. Remember, we're using right now the Redbird J Velocity Edition here. It's a desktop flight simulator. It is not a simulator that you can actually use to log hours, primarily because of the fact that it doesn't have a lot of the same things loaded in it. It's kind of they call it more for entertainment. Can you learn things on these machines? Abso-flippin-lutely. But oh God, here we go.
It's the time of the year again.
Okay, I'm changing now the view of this a little bit.
We will only have a total of 4 rides this spring.
I'm changing this view because I want to do something here.
May 14th and May 21st and June 4th. Rides will go from 4 to 6 p.m.
Okay.
We would love to have you bike.
Autopilot on.
Any grade level.
What altitude would you like me to be at here as I head to Keiki? You're looking at the ILS to 2? What altitude do I need to be at Keiki? 3,000, right? You see it? That's the altitude I need to be at, 3,000? Okay. So I'm over open water. Is there any reason that I can't get down to 3,000 right now? Okay, so let's go ahead and let's go to 3,000.
A neon glow dance party on
Okay.
Friday night at the Black Box. It'll be from 5:30 to 7, and the proceeds will sponsor an organization called Cuz Kathleen Cares, which supports.
Now, I'm going to take, my God, it's just, see, this just drives me nuts. It's why we can't get stuff done. Ugh.
And if you have any questions,
All right.
come see Molly in the office.
So the first thing that I'm going to do here now is I set up my G1.
Like Monday, we'll fish on Saturday, April 28th, near Cardigan. Guys are available. Be Chris to find out more.
If you see me put something in that coffee, don't say nothing. Okay, all right, so now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my G1000 so I can load the approach. The very first thing that I need to do is, up here, I need to say, okay, where in the world am I going? Well, I'm going to go to an airport, correct? Which one? PHOG, thank you very much. So let's look here at the nearest button. Okay, I've got JHM, and I go to the FMS knob, which is the big knob over here, and I'm going to turn the large side of the knob one click. That goes to PHNY. That's not where I want to go. PHOG, is that what we're after? Okay, direct to. I'm going to hit direct to. Then I'm going to go to the enter button. I'm going to say yes and yes. Now notice what's happening up here. So I have the machine knowing that I want to go to PHOG. Right now, my distance from the middle of the airport is approximately 19.7 miles. This shows my desired track and my true track here right now, which I'm not going to worry about that. There's a lot of things that we're doing. I've set my altitude that I want to get down to here to 3,000, okay? So now I need to load the actual procedure, right? I need to load the approach. So I go to this procedure button right here and I click. Do I want to select an approach? Okay, so I click the enter button. Now, which approach do I want? ILS2, okay, so now I go back to the FMS knob, the big side of the FMS knob, and I do 2 clicks. That gets me to ILS2, right? Is that what I want? Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to hit enter, correct? Now, where do I want to begin my approach? Why?
Because that's what you're closest to.
That's the closest one, and coming from the north, that would make sense for me to begin my approach at Keiki, at that initial approach fix at Keiki. Okay, makes sense? So with that, I'm going to go down here, and I don't want funky. Oh, I could get funky, but we're going Keiki. Okay. So there's Keiki, hit enter. Now, you have 2 options. You can load the approach and still fly with your own navigation or vectors, or we can activate it. If we activate it, it will ultimately begin from where that airplane is right now and give you a GPS signal directly to Keiki. And if we look at ForeFlight, girl, stay with me now. So if we look at ForeFlight, you see the airplane there. You see a magenta line to where? Keiki, because I have already preloaded ForeFlight for this approach. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to load the G1000 to, in essence, do the same thing. Okay, so we're going to activate this approach. FMS knob, outside, 1 click, hit enter and to main. Yes, thank you, Story, for this.
What does load do again?
Load just puts it in the system. It doesn't activate the approach. So you're ready to go, so that when you're ready to activate the approach, you go back into procedure, activate approach, click yes, yes, and you activate it. Okay, so we're already activating the approach. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to, through the magic of modern technology, I'm going to pull the GPS up here, and I'm going to put this here in this upper right hand corner. I am going to reduce this a little bit, and of course today this mouse is giving me trouble. I'm going to shrink that down just a little bit. Now if I take a look here, you can see here on the main, this shows you the layout of the entire approach and the missed approach. But what do you notice about the missed approach on this versus what you're looking at on your paper?
There's 2 little lines going instead of 1.
It's wrong. It's old. Here's another thing about this particular machine. This particular machine has not had the actual chart updates like the other machines. So for this, what we're going to have to do is kind of pretend a little bit on some of these things, sort of what we're doing, and I'll kind of call those out, and you'll see the differences as we go through this. But I wanted to show you that it's not identical, because these machines are they've not been updated with the real nav subscription. So I'm going to do this here. Okay, so now you can see this magenta line to Chpt, right? Got that so far? All right, so let's get this airplane going and headed to Chpt. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an outside view of this airplane. I'm going to pull around here so that I can look at this from astern. Notice that I have left this where you can actually see. The very first couple times that you do an instrument approach, it's actually good for you to actually see what you're flying, because if you're just in the clouds, you don't really understand big picture wise what you're doing. So with this, I'm going to leave this on this type of a view, and then I also have to have this here where I can get to the autopilot. But it also shows the PFD and the MFD, as well as the autopilot as we kind of do this, so I can explain things to you. So now I'm going to hit the pause button here. Okay, now then, let's look at what's happening here to our airplane. What do we got going on? Okay, we're in a right bank. Let's go to ForeFlight. Tell me what we see happening on that airplane right now in ForeFlight. Okay, so that's what we're doing there right now. So notice how ForeFlight is actually picking up and geolocating that airplane in an attempt to fly that course. It's going to be a little bit different because you have flown forward before you kind of make the turn. Now this is going to intercept that course. So now you're going to see the airplane main monitor. Now you're going to see the airplane kind of bank back to the left to intercept this course to bring, look at your HSI. Do you see your HSI here? How it's pulling it? Now look as it intercepts the course line. Here's your CDI coming in, just as advertised. Okay? See that coming in as you're intercepting the line here on your inset? Then, as that line is intercepted, it's going to turn slightly back to the right to fly that course correctly. Now, how far are we away from Chpt? 11.8. Gavin, tell them where you see that. Up at the top. So, we have here, and I'm going to reduce power. I'm going to reduce power here, guys, because we're going to slow this down so I can kind of talk here a little bit. Okay, so now we are at what kind of a rate per minute descent to get down to 3,000? 750. Is that going to get us to 3,000 from 5,200 feet to 3,000 feet? Here in this, we're at a true airspeed right now is about 118, 117. So I'm going to slow this down just a little bit so that we can get our descent down, because we still have 2,000 feet of altitude to lose. So at 750 feet a minute here, it's going to be close for us right now. Okay, so now, what I want to be doing now is, the first thing that I want to do is I want to get my weather. Tell me what the ATIS is.
The automated...
ATIS, what's ATIS? What's the frequency? 128.6, right? So I'm changing this to 128.6. Well, actually, I should have used the bottom one, and in fact, I think I will. So I'm going to do this, 128. Well, it is, but I don't want it there. I want it down here. 128.6. Okay, I'm going to use my little flip-flop. Going to put it there in active. Now then, advise on initial contact. You have information. Mike. This is what you write down. You record this out as far as you can. But you better hurry, because we're 7.4 miles from Chpt. See, it changed. So now you have November. I'm going to stop it here now. So you see how getting that ATIS is important? And I've done ATIS here while still maintaining my comms here, up here in COM 1 and COM 2. So at this point, I would be talking to approach. Then they would switch me over to the tower. So my active channel here, I want this to be on approach, which it's not right now. And then this one would be set for the tower when I'm ready to use it. And all I have to do is just flip it and we're ready to go. So everything in that blue box goes to the active once you hit the flip-flop. So if I hit the flip-flop switch, that becomes active. Flip-flop switch, now that becomes active. Okay? So I'm going to pull this back down. And again, of all days, the keyboard now is giving me grief. Crap. Okay, so now I'm 5 miles to Kaiki. Now, this is an ILS approach. Can I use it using GPS like I'm using right now? No. So I've got to switch this now over to the my localizer. Now, here's another thing. In this simulation, I can't change this, because if I change anything on here from my form of navigation, it switches everything up. So here's what I have to do. I have to pause the simulation to make the changes. So here's what I'm doing. I'm hitting pause right now. Okay? Now then, what do I need to do here to set up for my localizer? What is my localizer frequency?
117.7.
What is it? I don't want Lanai. What airport am I flying into? Look in the upper left-hand box.
110.
I don't need to find Kaiki.
110.1.
Okay, 110.1, because I'm finding Kaiki with GPS. I am preloading the localizer here to fly the ILS approach. Okay, so now, what is it again?
110.1.
110.1, correct? Okay, what is the identifier?
IOGG.
Tell me what you see up there in that corner. Okay, now if I change my CDI here now to localizer on nav1, here's my localizer, nav1, what is my final approach course?
It is 024.
024. Does this look like that's pointed to 024?
No.
So I need to change it, right? So I go over here to my course button. Here's my course button. And course adjust, it's going to be better for me to use the plus side of this. By the way, I used the barrow above that to change my altimeter to 29.91. I was at 29.92, but ATIS told me current altimeter setting 29.91. I changed it. Okay, so now I'm using the course to dial in what? 024. So I'm preloading for 024. Okay, now I have that set up for 024. Okay, now notice this. Do you see this that showed up right here? What do you think this is? No,
That's your,
it's a vertical box, right? So this would be your
vertical,
glide slope. This is your glide slope. So this is going to be the vertical component to your localizer. Your localizer is going to be down here. The vertical component is going to be here. So this is that rubbing your stomach, patting your head, and doing your taxes as you're coming down the pipe. And this is the things that you have to pay attention to as you're doing it. Okay? Now, what would I also load? What do I need for my mist? Look on your chart.
yeah.
I need to fly a particular radial from the OGG VOR, correct?
Yeah.
So let's get that loaded, shall we? So give me the frequency.
110.1.
Where is that?
No, no. It's 115.1.
Yeah.
All the low.
115, whoops. 115.1. Whoops. Okay, you see that? Now look what happens here. So there is OGG. So you see that? So I've got that loaded, but that's in my nav2, right? Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Come on. Ugh. So with this, now let's go to nav2. And what is it that I'm after here for the localizer here, what do I need this for this approach?
023.
Okay, so what I want is that as I fly away on the mist, I want to fly away on the 023 degree radial, correct? So I'm going to load that to 023. Because the GPS is going to get me lined up with nav 1, and then this is going to be over here for standby for me to fly the mist. So now, in nav 1, I've got my localizer, which gives me localizer and glide slope. In nav 2, I've got the OGG VOR, so I can fly my mist. I have got everything lined up here on my GPS map so that I can get from Ka'iki to camps via GPS, which that's still legal. I could use the Lanai VOR, couldn't I, if I didn't have GPS? But in this case, I'm using the GPS for it. So now, let's go back here, because if I don't change this here, it's going to throw everything off. Okay, so now I'm going to undo the pause thing. So here we go. This is us kind of flying along. Okay, back to this. So now I'm at 3,000 feet. I've got 4 miles to go to Ka'iki, and I am going to increase my airspeed slightly because that's the only way we're going to get this through in this class. Okay, so I've got my nav set up with the proper course. I've got my mist set up here for the proper course. I am talking to approach. I'm at the correct altitude. I'm at the correct airspeed. Now what? What do I think about now?
Pardon the interruption.
What do I think about now?
Once you intercept Ka'iki, you're going to have to intercept your next.
That word you just said. Next. What's next? What's next? Next. I'm 2.9 to Ka'iki. Okay, so 2.9 to Ka'iki. At Ka'iki, I'm going to be making a little bit of a turn to intercept that feeder route from the initial approach fix to head to camp. Okay, camps is where I am going to be making a turn. Now, let me show you something here while we have just a little bit of time. Next, oops, see what happens? God dang it, it hit that button again. Guys, that was my fault. It's gonna re-intercept this, I promise you. That's the problem. It's just, why is this keyboard doing it today? So, so now it's getting back on course. And again, that's what happens on this simulation. If you happen to hit the CDI, it goes to that next nav thing and it messes stuff up. So now it's going to re-intercept. I want to slave my heading bug here to this. Let's say for whatever reason they come back to you and they say, 700 Mike Sierra, I need you to turn right to a heading of 210 for traffic. Well, now I change my autopilot to heading. Notice here how I have it on nav, following all of the navigation stuff. I could change it to heading and it would follow the heading, okay? But I've got it on nav right now. So with this, that's why you always want to have your heading bug ready to go in case you're given a vector, okay? So now, we're half mile away from Ka'iki. Normally, you would begin your turn to Ka'iki just prior to arrival. On this sim, it gets to the waypoint and then turns. So you wind up with this big balloon turn on this thing, and that is not the way you want to do it. So you want to kind of cut that corner off slightly right before you get there because you don't want to blow through it. In this case, it got right on top of that waypoint before we initiated the turn. Now we have a little more maneuvering to do. What's our altitude? 3,000, okay? Now, let's take a look at ForeFlight. Thank you, Story. So now you can see that here on ForeFlight, you'll notice that it has activated the next leg. So the next leg is also magenta here, okay? So now we're tracking along here with ForeFlight as well as our G1000. So here we have everything that we need for us to legally fly this approach and back to the airplane. Okay? So, got it? Story? Okay, good job. Good job. Okay? So now we are approximately how far from camps? 3.3 nautical miles. Okay, so I'm setting my heading bug. Now, you'll notice up here at camps, this normally you would make this turn and you go a straight line. For whatever reason, they have thrown this portion of the hold in this. So what's going to happen is that your airplane is going to fly this little arc right here, right before I put it on the CDI on nav 1 to begin the approach.
So are you combining, like, isn't there a hold pattern right there? So isn't it gonna be really busy as you try to intercept the next leg? Oh, you're higher.
We're going to be lower. They're going to be above you.
Okay.
If they're holding out there. But remember, on that chart right there, we don't know if that's going to go away or not.
Yeah.
So, and another way that you can use this is that you can also use that for a procedure turn. Let's say that you were trying to fly this approach and you were approaching from the northeast. Well, you can overfly it from the northeast, come direct to camp, fly the procedure turn to get yourself turned back around and begin the approach at camps. That's why it's also an initial approach fix. Okay? So now we're approaching camps, 1.2 to camps, and again, it's going to fly something here that is not standard, and it's just the way that the sim actually is kind of working. So we get to camps, what's next? We want to intercept what approach course? 024. That's what we're after there. And then as we get to camps, we're going to begin our descent down to what altitude? 2,400. So once that starts at camps, I'm going to switch the views over here and I am going to begin a descent down to 2,400 feet. Okay, so now you'll see how it's starting to do this. Now I'm going to change change this to 2,400 feet. I'm going to increase my descent to 800 feet per minute. Now you can see that it's beginning this turn here. But again, remember, we have overshot camps, and this is kind of a rookie deal that you would do as you're starting to practice your approach. We would not do this. We would intercept camps via one of those lead radials that we talked about there with this, but in this case, we're using the GPS to set us up to fly the ILS. Good so far. So now it's going to get established, and when it's established back on course, then what I'm going to do is I am going to set this up for the ILS. Okay? So now you're going to see that it's going to swing back around here and it's going to wobble around to try to intercept the course, which is just, it's just bad form.
Couldn't you start using the localizer?
I'm going to start using it as soon as it lines up. And the reason being is because the way this sim is flogging this thing around, normally you would begin the ILS before you get to camps. But because of the way that this sim is set up, it kind of messed that up for us. So again, this is one of those areas that we're kind of having to pretend. Okay, so on ForeFlight, you can see that now that your little airplane is attempting to get on this next active leg. Now back to the airplane. So now, here's what I want to do. I want to go, and I'm going to do this really quick. So I'm going to do this. Now I'm activating this approach. I'm changing it now to approach mode. Okay, so now I'm on approach mode. So now you'll notice this. Am I just slightly right of my course? Yes. So it's going to try to fix that. And then my glide slope is up here. I'm already at 2,400 feet, and I've got 3.7 miles to go before supposedly I begin my descent. However, if you look now at ForeFlight, compare ForeFlight now to your charts. They should be identical.
Yeah.
But now look at the airplane, thank you. You see how hard this is to do this all by yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so there you go. Now you can see that you also have a different waypoint up there, which, by the way, this is the screen version that we would use to fly this approach. You have your geography located here, and then you see your next waypoints here. So this is how you'd have your MFD to fly an instrument approach. Okay? So now, we're pretty much set up on our course, close enough, okay, to this for now, for this display. You can see that there's another one. There's RTTY. Well, RTTY is not there anymore. and also TEBS is further out than it is on this sim. So it's going to be a little bit different to intercept this, because we're showing 1.6 to TEBS. It's actually further to TEBS than this sim is showing. But you want to intercept your glide slope from below, correct? So now we are down at an altitude below our intercept point, so that we will start watching next. We know that we're lined up here the way we need to be. Okay, so we're going to get lined up. We'll start looking for our glide slope to come in. That's what we start calling that. We say the glide slope will come in. By this point, we have been switched from approach to the tower. So now we're talking to tower. We have already been approved to begin the approach. And as we start this approach, at some point here, they're going to clear us to land. So we'll be able to do that as well. Okay. So now we're just flying along. Everything is fat and happy. Notice my airspeed. I've got my airspeed set up here so that I can put my first notch of flaps in right before I begin this descent. So we'll do our checklist, our pre-go-around checklist right before we start descending at our at descent point. So with this here, you can see the glide slope starting to come in now. All right, so now I'm doing my checklist. Gas is on the fullest. Undercarriage is down and welded. Mixture set for field elevation. Prop is good. Power is good. Switches on. That means all of your lights and your fuel pump. You turn your fuel pump on here at this point. Okay? The next thing you're going to do is you're going to put, when your glide slope is a half dot above the horizon, you put your flaps in. Then, seat belts. All seat belts are all checked. Seats in their upright position. Give another tug on that seat belt to make sure that things are nice and cozy. Okay? And now we're ready to start this. Here we go. We're a half dot above. Okay? Not quite a half dot above. You see, we just came down the dot. So now, right here, I'm going to put my first notch of flaps in. And I may need to add a little power. But we're going to see. So now you'll notice that my airspeed has started to slow. Now, what should happen is that now the autopilot will capture not just the glide slope, but the localizer. Now we should begin a descent. So now I'm going to change this altitude now to what? What do I want to put my altitude down to here?
980.
Well, the next will be 980, but I'm on the glide slope now. So, nope, what's my minimum? 254? Okay. This won't let me do that, so I'm going to put 300 in there. Okay? So now, you'll see how the nose is starting to come down below the horizon, and the aircraft is now, the autopilot is capturing the vertical component of this. But you see how we're slightly above the glide slope? This tells us this is the glide slope. This is us. Okay? So we are slightly above the glide slope. All things being equal, it's a little better to be above the glide slope than it is below the glide slope. Are we on the localizer? Yes. So our CDI is good here. So I'm right down the pipe. I'm still just a little high, but it's capturing it here right now. I'm going to reduce just a little power because I noticed that my airspeed was starting to increase. So I'm going to reduce a little power here. I'm going to go full forward on my mixture. Now you see here how the glide slope is kind of coming up to us there a little bit, meaning that we are descending correctly down to that glide slope. So here we are. Everything is looking good there. And this is what it's looking like as you're coming into this airport. Now I want you to look between the nose gear and the left main. What do you see there? You see a factory. And you see smokestacks. Can you see why we don't want to be low on an approach? Okay? Also, if we're in mountainous terrain, same thing. If you're going to err either side of that, it's better to be slightly high than it is to be slightly low. So let's take a look at our instruments. Glide slope was almost perfect. There for just a second. We're still on localizer. Okay? Everything here is looking good. Everything is tracking good. We're approximately 3.3 nautical miles away from the runway. Everything is looking great right here. Everything is stable. Everything is looking great. My engine instruments are looking good. I've got all kinds of fuel. Everything is working properly. Everything looks nice. And again, this is us. Notice the smoke coming out of the smokestack. Now, take a look at the glide slope. If you could see the visual glide slope, the VASI right there, what's that telling you? No, red over white. You are all right. That means you are on the glide slope. So everything right there, guys, is looking perfect. So here we are. What is my decision height? 254. I cannot go below 254. What have I set in here as my minimum? 300. Okay? I'm also going to get a notice when I am 500 feet off the deck, meaning that at 554 feet MSL, I'm going to get a warning. Here it comes. See it on ForeFlight? ForeFlight? See it on ForeFlight, how I'm at 500 feet to give me that warning? Okay, back to the main. So here I am. Now I'm looking at my altitude here as well. Okay, going down to 400. Here's 400. 100 feet to go. Down here. Now I'm going to take a look. I have the runway in sight. Disconnect autopilot. Second notch of flaps. And guys, I'm landing this airplane a little wonky here. I don't have the rudders connected here. So this is probably the least stable part of the flight thus far. Last notch of flaps. All power out. Now all I'm doing is I'm just bleeding off that last bit of energy. Little ballooning right there. Oh my God, Greg. Horrible. Oh yeah, we lived. Okay. So guys, there we are. That's what an instrument approach looks like. Now at ForeFlight, you can see that ForeFlight will automatically go to the airport component of this so that you can see the taxiways that you're going to be asked to get off on. So this is why ForeFlight is just like really awesome. We also have in the airplanes Safe Taxi. So Safe Taxi will also be a part of that as well. Okay? What did I miss?
Go outside of the airplane.
Oh, I know. Yeah, we're off out here in the grass somewhere.
No, it's a nice mark dog.
Okay, so so guys, that's what that looks like. When we start tomorrow, oh, Story, well done, well done. Okay, so when we start tomorrow, I should have had you go back to the main. So when we start tomorrow, guys, here's what we're going to do. Tomorrow, we're going to start with the VOR approach. You're going to tell me what to do and when to do it. Then we're going to shoot the RNAV approach. You're going to tell me what to do and when to do it. Okay? Then we're going to wrap up Chapter 23, quiz Chapter 23 on Friday.
Wait, are we doing both RNAV and VOR tomorrow?
Yeah.
So, for chapter 23, we should be rereading the chapter, correct? And going
Yeah.
back through that. And then also studying prepware arrivals.
Well, what is Chapter 23 about? Instrument approaches. So everything that is in the text, that's what you're responsible for. So you're not in private pilot anymore. This is instrument. This is Big Red. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. R, when are we starting the simulators?
So as soon as we get through Chapter 28.
Which is
Yeah.
Holding.
Holds. So we got wood to cut. We've got one other thing after that, but that's when we start doing this. Because, guys, we're going to be on track. Shh, 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 shh. We're on track to finish to finish all of this by the end of April. So we're on track to do that. Okay?
Seriously? That's 6 days. Wow, that's crazy. Actually, 7 days.
Well, yeah, but we gotta hustle. Okay? Then we start looking at studying. We start doing test prep. So, read ahead, flipped classroom. Make sure all of this stuff that you know what's going on before you get here. Don't let this class be the first time you see something. Okay?
Okay, see you at lunch.
Okay, off you go.
At lunch today?
Lunch today. Those of you that owe me a quiz, lunch today, or, well, I'll do it tomorrow as well. Okay. 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 Yes.